Welcome to First. I'm Nichelle Polston along with Shirley Min. Mark Eichman is off this week. The CDC findings that violence is a health hazard in Wilmington has spurred some action. We'll look ahead to see what may come of them.
One outcome may be the strengthening of community centers. Rose Hill is an example of how a gathering place can experience violence, but also be reborn.
And it must have been one heck of a dream. Meet the Kennett Square artist who took a vision and put it on display in a very unique way. First, your public media news magazine starts now. The CDC Advisory Council recently released its report on violence as a health hazard. There were a number of suggestions to help keep young people out of trouble, especially those who have experienced significant trauma. The crime here, mostly gun violence committed by young adults, has been looked at as a public health issue. So where do we go from here? In this week's First Look, we'll hear what leaders think should be done from this point.
I would say the majority of kids have dealt with some type of trauma, whether it's in their own household or a close family member or friend.
Inside Kingswood Community Center in the northeast section of the city, officials can't afford to eliminate any of their services. This community depends on it.
You're looking at thousands of youth that are in these neighborhoods, so they really don't have many opportunities. So when we're say we're serving 80 to 100, that's a small fraction of the amount of kids that are actually in these neighborhoods.
Thanks to a recent report, community services are being pushed to work together more in an effort to help save young people from being pulled into a life of crime. So what's next for community centers like this one that are already committed to serving the needs of children?
The things that we're working on now are utilizing the resources that we do have.
In 2013, officials from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention were called into Wilmington to study gun violence among youth from a public health perspective. By 2015, the Delaware Department of Health and Social Services formed a council of 38 representatives that used CDC data to create the following 6 recommendations. First on the list is to create violence-free environments and build stronger community centers. Next is to develop a referral system for at-risk youth. Another goal is to develop pathways of success for troubled youth. Also protect youth through programs to de-escalate conflicts and retaliation. All this is believed to be possible by integrating social services. And finally, address policy issues that have unintended adverse consequences for youth. Governor John Carney believes it's important to also look at poverty and points to another solution as well.
It starts with education and the schools. We all know in this world that every student that graduates needs to have a pathway to a good job with skills or on to college to get the kind of education they need to be competitive. So that's one area.
However, there are some challenges, and that's implementing the recommendations from the CDC Advisory Council.
I believe the beauty of this work is that we have identified that the programs that we are currently supporting, whether that be through the Children's Department, through education, through the Department of Health and Social Services, are good programs.
The problem is that there aren't enough good programs out there that are designed for those high-risk children who have experienced the type of trauma that often leads to violent behavior.
Unfortunately, life does many times present bad things for us. So how do we deal with those bad things? That's part of resiliency. So how do we support our children and youth that when bad things do happen, they're resilient, they can become productive, they can understand the consequences before they occur, but our system then has to reflect that and support that.
According to the National Survey for Children's Health, there are nearly 20,000 children living in the city of Wilmington, and more than 60% of them have experienced trauma. The CDC also took notice to that after reviewing 500 individual gun cases. What they found is that those who were violent had some things in common.
Most all of them also had been victims of some level of assault. You know, it could be physical assault, could be stabbings, many of which were also victims of gun violence themselves.
As for the folks here, the goal is to continue to keep children engaged and on the right path.
We're 71 years strong, and we plan to be another 71 years. I won't be here 71 years, but I want to leave this place as best shape as I can for the next person.
There's certainly a lot going on at Kingswood Community Center. One partnership includes one with Delaware Rush, an outreach program determined to get more young people involved in soccer. In fact, the head coach of the soccer team at the University of Delaware will be a part of that program as well, basically providing kids with outlets children wouldn't be involved in on the regular basis is the goal at Kingswood. In the meantime, those of you at home can take a look at the CDC Advisory Council's final report. Just go online. It can be found on the website of the Delaware Department of Health and Social Services.
So, Nichelle, it sounds like a lot came out of the CDC report, but what brought the CDC to Wilmington in the first place?
Well, Shirley, Wilmington City Council President Hanifa Shabazz initially reached out to the CDC to take a look at the violence here. She tells me the children that were killed as a result of the gun violence were children she actually watched grow up. The numbers were so alarming, she figured it had to be a part of a bigger problem.
Okay, thank you so much, Nichelle, and we'll continue to provide updates on this issue at newsworks.org/Delaware. In about 15 minutes, though, we will visit with Delaware Today magazine and another example of community centers trying to get involved.
Coming up on First, we'll show you how a little community support turns a bad situation into a positive at a Wilmington center aimed at helping kids. And a recurring dream helps a Kennett Square woman become the artist she was meant to be.
State of Play this week, and we say hello to Steve Tanzer once again from DelawareLiberal.net. Steve, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
In the next segment in our show, we're going to have Stephanie Hansen, former State of Player here on our show, but she's also the Democratic candidate in the upcoming special election for the state Senate. So when was the last time that the state Senate or control of it was up for grabs?
About 44 years ago.
So it's been in under Democratic control for that long?
It has. I believe, in fact, that it flipped when a Republican moved their desk over to the other side of the aisle. So it's been that long, yes.
So is the state GOP just going all in, doubling down behind Marino to sort of gain control?
Well, of course. I mean, what you had coming out of the presidential election was a demoralized Democratic Party. You had an energized Republican Party here. You had a vacant seat because, of course, the incumbent in the 10th senatorial district was elected as our lieutenant governor. Once she was sworn into office, that seat became vacant.
Right.
So that was the lay of the land at that point. And I think things may have changed a little bit. Here's the way I see it, if it's okay. Currently, the district itself runs from the southern part of Newark straight south along our western border through Glasgow, crossing the C&D Canal, then meanders southeast towards Odessa and picks up a significant portion of Middletown.
Okay.
District does have a Democratic edge. It's 45.3% D registration, 28.3 R, with the rest being independents or with another political party. If you just look at the Clinton-Trump vote in that district, if you take out all the other candidates, Clinton won the district by about a 57 to 43 margin. So that's essentially what you're looking at.
Okay.
However, a special election is always a turnout election. And looking back a couple of months ago, I think on this show I said the Republicans were well positioned to take this seat because you did have a demoralized Democratic Party, a resurgent Republican Party. On one hand, a chance to pick up something, and on the other hand, forced to defend something, which in fact they're only forced to defend because the incumbent senator moved to a different position.
Right.
Those were the dynamics of the race then.
If the turnout is large, as expected in a special election, so then would you think that the Democrats would energize and say, well, okay, we lost the presidential election, so let's really go out and make sure we keep control of the state Senate?
Well, keep in mind now that in general, turnouts for special elections are exceedingly small.
Oh, okay.
Minuscule in many cases. I've worked on enough of them, on both sides of them. It's like, so it's really not going to be very large. So that's why I say it's a turnout election. Who can turn out most of their voters? The Democrats have a registration edge. Here's how I think the dynamics of the race have changed since I first said the Republicans were exceedingly well positioned to take this seat back in like December. I think it was the first time I mentioned it. And that is, to what extent does for lack of a better word, Trump revulsion, mobilize voters in that district. Yes, it's a state race, but in many ways, both of the candidates are proxies for their parties.
Right.
In addition, because of the some of the things that Trump is doing, I think that they become proxies for whether or not you think what's going on is good or bad for the country. And I think in that context, it does give Democrats the advantage. Both parties have great field teams out there, volunteers. One thing that did do for the Democrats, it mobilized grassroots volunteers to come down and work in that campaign.
So we invited both candidates. We invited John Marino to come. Stephanie Hansen, as I mentioned earlier, will be here later. But Marino said he only wants to campaign in his district, so he declined to come onto the show. But he did almost win the race outright a few years ago.
That is correct, back in 2014.
And he was running against Bethany Hall Long.
He was running against Bethany Hall Long. There was a very key extenuating circumstance. I think Bethany Hall Long was cruising to a very comfortable re-election when her husband was caught on tape stealing signs of her opponent. And that, of course, generated a backlash. She still won, though, but I mean, it was much closer than people had ever thought it was going to be.
So what's your prediction then for the special election?
I think that if this election had been held 2 or 3 weeks ago, Marino would have won. I think, not knowing anything, but I think that because of the mobilization and people really just looking at Trump with alarm, the Democrats will be able to do enough and that Stephanie Hansen will win the race. Narrow margin. I mean, it could go either way, but I think that's what's going to happen.
So no matter how the election turns out, the count will always be 11-1 in the Senate, or 11-10 in the Senate.
Oh, okay.
So will we see something, not the Delaware way is, everyone goes along with the Democratic Party typically. But do you think we're going to start to see, alliances form on regional or an ideological basis?
Well, you've really had alliances all along. I think the Republicans, however, are beginning to come together on an ideological basis. One recent example of that was the fact that the Senate Republicans voted en masse to oppose the nomination of Sean Garvin to be Delaware's DENREC secretary. Now, Garvin is an administrator. That's what he is. He's not what anyone would call like a flaming environmentalist. Keep in mind, you need 11 yes votes. It doesn't matter how many no votes you get. If you don't get 11, you don't pass anything. So that's the way, yeah, exactly. So there was no issue there.
Okay. Steve Tanzer, always interesting. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see what happens on February 25th.
There's a lot happening online when you go to WHYY.org/first. You can watch this show right now. Past shows are there as well. Surf around and tell us what you think. The big political story in Delaware this month is the special election in the 10th Senate District that is in the Middletown area, and the reason there will be a February 25th election is because Bethany Hall Long is now Lieutenant Governor. Stephanie Hansen is the Democratic candidate for this seat. She joins us on First, and we like to point out that we did invite your candidate, your Republican opponent, John Marino, to join us, but he did decline. But let's start off like we do with most interviews. Let's start off with your 30-second elevator speech. Why should you be elected to represent the 10th Senate District?
Well, I think because I represent the voice of working families. I've been there. I understand how hard it is to put food on the table, to worry about getting your kids a good education, to be able to save, to send them to college, and to plan for retirement. So I think the voice of working families really needs to be something that's heard and heard loudly in Dover.
So Delaware made national news last week with the incident in Smyrna, the prison hostage situation. What should investigators be looking at? What are the questions that people should be asking?
Well, and I'd like to point out that I believe Governor Carney is actually looking into this situation as well. We should try to find out, how we got to the situation that we did. Is this something that had been on the radar screen for quite some time? And if so, kind of what is it that we didn't address during that period of time that we absolutely have to address at this point? We should have addressed so that this wouldn't happen in the past, and so that it certainly won't happen in the future. But there's clearly a situation that has evolved that we have not been on top of as a state, and we must get our arms around that at this point.
So if one person is found involved in the death of Sergeant Stephen Floyd, should we take another look at how the death penalty should be viewed here in Delaware?
I think we need to let kind of tempers and emotions calm a bit. We need to make sure that we've done a clear and thorough investigation, and then take the appropriate steps after after we've gotten that far. Because I think what we don't want to do is we don't want to react while tempers and emotions are high. We need to react rationally and reasonably going forward.
Well, let's take a look at the economy. Is that the #1 issue in the race?
Yes, it is, absolutely. Jobs and the economy is the #1 issue that I hear in every community. We've not done a good enough job at bringing in good paying jobs into Delaware. I think there has been some thought to doing that, but it hasn't worked out very well. There are really 3 things that we need to do to put those in place. Because what government needs to do is it needs to set the table for good jobs growth, and then step aside and let the business community take advantage of that. So we need to have in place a ready and able workforce that is on the ground, so that when a company comes in here, they know that they've got employees that they can draw from, a community they can draw from. Not that they have to raise their own employees,
yes,
train their own people when they get here. Now, obviously, we want to make sure that we're bringing in companies that can train people, because they're going to have specific needs. But they want to know when they first come into a community, are they going to have people that can drive forklifts? Are they going to have people that can take samples, that can do welding? So we need to make sure that we've got a ready and able workforce. We also have to make sure as government that we have in place good infrastructure. Our roads are in place, our bridges are in place, they've got water, they've got sewer. We have the basic necessities that government needs to supply. And then finally, we need to make sure that we have not placed in front of them such excessive regulations and governmental burdens that even if they wanted to locate here, it's going to take 2 years to get their plan approved. That's what I hear a lot. And I've actually represented companies before involved in bringing new businesses into Delaware. And one of the concerns that I've heard for some time is that, we're all ready to come. We think this is a great place. But the problem is that it's going to take us 2 years to get our plan approved. And even if you've got a ready workforce,
yes,
and you've got infrastructure, if it takes you that long to get your plan approved, you're not going to locate here.
So I want to squeeze in one more question. John Marino has noted that the Democrats have been in power in the Senate for 45 years. That's the reason he should be elected. How does one account for the one-sided Democratic majority? How do you view that?
Well, I think, first of all, I think the whole 40 years thing is a bit of a red herring, because the Republicans were actually in control of the House till 2008. So under any facts, even alternative facts, 2008 was not 40 years ago. So we need to kind of cut that down and be a little more, I think, realistic about what's going on. Delaware has been a very Democratic state since then, I think because the Democrats have really kind of spoken to the issues that were important to the people.
Well, thanks so much, Stephanie. 5.5 minutes flies by just like that. Thanks again, Stephanie Hansen, the Democratic candidate in the upcoming February 25th election in the 10th District. We'll have more next week on this race, including comments from Republican John Marino and Libertarian candidate Joe Lasendorfer.
Earlier in the broadcast, we discussed ways the state, Wilmington, and community leaders want to curb violence in Delaware's largest city. One example could be found in our February contribution from our content partners at Delaware Today magazine. The Rose Hill Community Center has always been known as a safe haven for kids. It suffered a setback, though, following a shooting 2 years ago. But the center is stronger than ever and providing recreation, education, and support to its Newcastle community and beyond. Since 1982, the Rose Hill Community Center has been a beacon in Newcastle. Open 7 days a week, the center is more than a place of refuge.
The center's like a safe haven. It was my home away from home. I live 5 minutes away, so if I'm not home, I'm always here.
Boys and Girls Club youth counselor Carlos Cannon Jr. started coming to Rose Hill at the age of 5. At the tender age of 12, he decided he wanted to be part of Rose Hill.
Everybody took me in as their son, so it was just the love and the care and the respect that I got from everybody that made me want to give back.
Cannon isn't the only one who feels that way. Regina Butcher works out there, volunteers there, and is willing to jump in wherever she's needed.
I would do anything for Rose Hill family. It's no problem. Rose Hill family has become part of my family.
We caught up with her while she was working out with her personal trainer.
Q, he's so encouraging. He's our fitness instructor, plus our trainer. I mean, when you think that you can't do it, he's right there to say you can.
Butcher says Rose Hill offered her a respite at a time in her life when things weren't going so well. The center's wellness programs also include age-specific classes, like this line dance class for seniors.
It is just what my seniors that live in the area or come to the senior center need.
Sheila Burkell, Rose Hill's executive director, says there are so many programs at the center, nearly 24, that listing them to interested folks doesn't do it justice.
Different people that'll come in and say, well, what do you have going on here? And for me, it's easier to show them than it is to tell them, because there's usually something going on in each aspect of the community center. We have a food closet. You can eat or get food at Rose Hill about 6 times a week. We have a wedding chapel, and it's kind of like drive-by wedding in a minute, like in Vegas, but it's for those folk that don't have a church, but they don't want that justice of the peace feel. And it's a beautiful little chapel-like setting. We have a college awareness and planning program that's in here, Holmes Smith Consultant. She does a fantastic college awareness conference every May that we all partner with in here so that families can find out what they need to get their kids in school.
For Burkell, her staff, and team of volunteers, which she credits for keeping the place running smoothly, it's all about building strong people, families, and communities. As 91-year-old Dorothy Eccles sums it up, Rose Hill is the right place for those who want to uphold the center's positive principles.
It's one of the best places you can come to stay out of trouble and to learn something and to get to know nice people. And here at Rose Hill, it's very good examples. So we mean for you to be right and do right and stay right.
Mark Nardone, executive editor from Delaware Today magazine, joins me now. Mark, good to see you.
You too, Shirley.
The Rose Hill Community Center, obviously worthy of a lot of praise. We focused on that in our story, but it seems like they've sort of hit a ceiling so much, kind of like they can only do so much good just because of where they're located. Do you see that area obviously needing a lot of work ahead of them?
It does need some work, but it's also got a good base, and I know there are several churches there that are fairly new, highly visible. I don't know about the outreach of all their ministries, but I know at Keenan Baptist, there is a real serious effort to do some counseling, to help with substance abuse and things like that. So,
and they're working hand in hand with the center, which is great.
Yes.
The 2 years ago we had mentioned there was the shooting there, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, people don't brazenly walk into a community center every day and shoot someone.
And they still haven't caught anyone yet.
No.
To my understanding.
No, but there is a real strong sense of community there that makes it doubly shocking. You might see that sort of thing on the street now and then. You don't see it in the center.
There's the bowling alley. I mean, what do you see as sort of working against that community to get it turned around? Or maybe the library is a good start there to kind of get the ball rolling in the right direction.
I think the library is a great start. I think some of the housing stock is aging, it's getting dilapidated. There is some new investment there that's good to see. But some of the housing stock, there are all the sorts of blight issues, recycling centers and things like that are close by that get into sort of the environmental justice issues. And some things like that need to be addressed.
Okay, so once we can get that addressed, maybe we'll eventually see a turnaround, but that obviously takes some time. Yes. All right, Mark, thank you so much. And you can read the full story at DelawareToday.com.
Diane Cassie was a photographer, but artistically, she wasn't happy. She was also having recurring dreams that had her painting and selling items involving silk. So when she saw an ad for a silk painting workshop, she signed up. That was 21 years ago. She has been painting silk ever since. See how that dream turned into our first experience this week.
I'm Diane Cassey, and I paint on silk. I was working in photography and feeling very frustrated about having too many layers of chemicals and lenses between myself and the artwork. I had also been having dreams about painting on silk, and they were repeat dreams, all of showing a faceless stranger my work in a gallery. I saw an article about a silk painter that was offering a workshop, so I signed up, and I've been doing it ever since. I love gardening, I love plants. I live in the woods, so it's kind of like my little tree house out here. Silk flows, and things that are natural just kind of flow too. Everything starts out white, and I apply dyes and designs over the dyes. They all get applied with a brush, steam set it, and then it's a scarf. I get my hands dirty. You know, I can just get right into the silk. I get dye all over my fingers, which probably isn't a good idea, but it just feels good. The dye flows very naturally. It's fun to work with. One woman that has been a repeat customer had a scarf that I'd made for her, and she said she was riding a camel in the desert in Morocco. It blew off her neck and blew away, and she lost it and asked me to make another one for her. So, you know, I think about who ended up with that. You know, where did it go? Did somebody find it? And it's kind of fun. It feels good. It really does. It satisfies a part of my soul that, you know, I don't get satisfied at work.
Diane hopes to continue growing her business and to be able to make more of the large pieces she enjoys working on. You can find Diane and her scarves at various craft shows all over Delaware.
And next week on First, we're going to continue our countdown to the special election in Middletown. What's on people's minds? And the Delaware Theater Company offers a performance dealing with racial intolerance.
We'll explore those stories and more next time. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Shirley Min and Mark Eichman, who will be back next week, I'm Nichelle Poston. Have a great week. And how about if we end with the Lewis Polar Bear Plunge in Rehoboth last Sunday? Enjoy.